Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel and I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. Today we're going to continue with our country case study series where we zoom in on a specific country and look at the migration history, policies, and current situation of migrants in a 3-video part series. Today, we are focusing on Egypt. In this video, I want to talk about the migration policy situation and governance situation in the country. So let's just jump right in and get started. So let's have a quick recap on immigration policies in Egypt. If you want to know more on that, of course, you can look at the video on migration history also. So until 1961, political controls on migration were enforced, and mainly through exit visa requirements. So it was more difficult to actually emigrate from Egypt until 1961. In 1964, the Committee for Manpower was established and authorized to consider applications for emigration. And in 1971, the Constitution with Article 52 granted Egyptians the right to immigrate and return home. So really in 1971 was this major shift where now migration was a right for all Egyptians. Moreover, the Law 73 in 1971 allowed public sector employees to return to their jobs after an absence of 1 year, subsequently extended to 2 years, together with the removal of other legal impediments. So following the open door policy adopted in 1974, all restrictions on labor migration were lifted. With the growing number of Egyptian diaspora abroad, the government took several steps in establishing and strengthening its relationship with the Egyptian diaspora and to regulate immigration. And if you'd like to learn more about the term diaspora and where that comes from and what that is, please check out my video on that. So let's look at the government institutions involved in migration in Egypt. Starting in the 1980s, the Egyptian government has set up specialized agencies and passed legislation to organize migration and build links between Egyptian immigrants and their countries of origin. So the Presidential Decree 574 in 1981 set up the Ministry of State for Immigration Affairs to sponsor Egyptians going abroad for work and provide them with a number of services. It also drew upon an overall migration strategy aimed at national development. So in 1996, the Egyptian Ministry of Manpower and Emigration, or MME, was established and is the most influential in developing migration policy and mobility management tools. The MME attempts to encourage and facilitate regular migration, as well as establish and enhance cultural and social ties with the Egyptian diaspora. So the MME is also the head of the Higher Committee for Migration, which was established in 1977. The Higher Committee for Migration was delegated to ensure migration policy development, coherence, and coordination of all bodies involved in mobility management in the country. Now let's look at the first steps of diaspora building. So at the beginning of Mubarak's era in the 1980s, there was a twofold immigration policy. And this clearly distinguished between so-called permanent and so-called temporary immigration. And this distinction remains partly valid to this day. For the first time, the Law 111 in 1983 also introduced duties of the state in terms of maintaining contact with Egyptians abroad, such as establishing posts in Egyptian embassies for officials with responsibilities for maintaining contact with Egyptians abroad, establishing Egyptian associations, cultural clubs, and Arabic language training centers, and organizing cultural events abroad. It also made major concessions in terms of nationality and reaffirmed the right to retain Egyptian nationality when emigrating. Additionally, any Egyptian citizen who emigrated before this law and had lost his or her citizenship now had the right to regain it. The law also attempted to make investing in Egypt's economy attractive by exempting immigrants' deposits in Egyptian banks from all taxes, and by treating investments in Egypt by Egyptians living abroad as foreign investments, with all of the advantages that would be entailed by this. So now let's turn to diaspora rights after the Egyptian Revolution in 2011. The aftermath of the Egyptian Revolution represented an important step forward for Egypt's diaspora policies because Egypt granted political rights to Egyptians abroad, thereby moving from a system of diaspora building to a system of diaspora integration after 2011. On the other hand, it also introduced policies to combat irregular transit migration and human trafficking in close cooperation with the European Union. So let's turn our attention now to the Ministry of State for Emigration and Egyptian Expatriates, which is MoSEEA for short. It was established in 2015. It's considered the competent authority to manage the affairs of Egyptians residing outside the geographical borders of the Egyptian state. The ministry's main responsibilities and focus is on communication and the affairs of Egyptians abroad, an immigration framework, and irregular migration. They have a website where they offer a number of services, and the ministry is responsible for planning and coordinating partnership programs between the ministry, states, and regional and international organizations. The ministry was established in response to calls of Egyptians abroad with the aim of forming a national public that supports national issues. The ministry also aims to benefit from the experiences of Egyptians abroad in various areas of development and to strengthen national political, social, and economic ties between them and Egypt and between them and each other. The ministry also aims to set up a comprehensive migration policy for Egyptians abroad in light of the national development goals and the country's welfare. There also are a number of international organizations and international cooperation that is also going on in Egypt. Egypt has signed several bilateral agreements related to immigration, primarily with Arab countries since 1970. Egypt has also ratified several international labor organization treaties, as well as the 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 protocol, as well as the 2000 Palermo Protocols on human trafficking. Today, Egypt is a member of the African Union, the League of Arab States, and the Community of the Sahel-Saharan States, all of which involve some level of cooperation on migration issues. Now let's look specifically at the Egyptian law regulating foreign workers. So law number 12 of 2003 regulates the work of foreigners in Egypt's public, private, and civil sectors. Article 28 stipulates that foreigners must first obtain a work visa and a permit from the respective ministries supervising the sectors that they belong to before taking the job. The minister of the respective sector sets the eligibility conditions to apply for work permits and the conditions of renewal, the procedures that should be followed, and the cases in which the license can be canceled. The minister also designates the professions that cannot be assumed by foreigners and their maximum percentage in each profession. An organization can also not exceed 10% of its workforce with unskilled or semi-skilled non-Egyptian labor, or 25% in the case of skilled workers. Now turning our attention specifically to refugees and asylum seekers, which are important in the Egyptian case. Egypt made reservations to articles in the 1951 Convention regarding local integration. So they specifically made reservations on 12.1, 20, 23, and 24. So even though they did sign the Refugee Convention and the protocols, there are still quite some restrictions to how they deal with refugees in the country. These articles mainly cover basic rights such as personal status, unequal treatment of refugees compared to nationals, access to public relief, free primary education, and employment. Refugees in Egypt have only a few rights under Egyptian law due to a number of prohibitions and restrictions put in place by the government. Even when rights do exist on paper, refugees are often unable to utilize these rights. So let's look at the Egyptian law that regulates asylum seekers and refugees. The government of Egypt, represented by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, remains the main counterpart for policy and coordination in this area. The humanitarian coordination mechanism on refugee issues in Egypt are the Interagency Working Group, the Intersector Working Group, and the Sector Working Groups. After obtaining the registration card from the UNHCR office, asylum seekers and refugees must first obtain a reference number from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. After obtaining the number, refugees and asylum seekers must present their documents at the Ministry of Interior, as they're in charge of the residence permits. The government allows refugees and asylum seekers registered with UNHCR to regularize their residency and grants 6-month renewable residency permits. Refugees in Egypt benefit from the right to civil status documentation. This includes the process and issuance of documents such as birth certificates, custody documentation, marriage and divorce certificates, death certificates, and others as applicable through national legal partners and structural mechanisms. Now, Egypt is also party to several international treaties. They have, for instance, signed the 1949 ILO Migration for Employment Convention, the 1951 Refugee Convention, as we mentioned before, and was ratified in 1951, and the protocol also in 1951. They've also signed the 1969 OAU Convention governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa. They've also signed the 1975 ILO Migrant Workers Convention, the 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child, the 1990 UN Migrant Workers Convention, the 2000 Human Trafficking Protocol, and the 2000 Migrant Smuggling Protocol, and the CMW International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families. So I hope that just gave you a quick overview of the migration policy and governance situation in Egypt today, and a brief bit about its history. If you want to know more about the current situation of migration in Egypt, please do check out that next video. Please also leave us some comments below. Have you had experience in Egypt or with migration to or from Egypt? Let us know. So if you like this video, please do comment down below, like, and subscribe to the channel. And please also feel free to share this video around to anyone who you think might be useful for. Again, remember to be on a lookout for many more videos on this channel, as well as more country series, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.